everybody. It is Katie Kessner. I am the primary host of the Dear Katie podcast, and we are so delighted to have you take this journey with us on our weekly podcast episodes. I just want to remind everyone to do great self-care. Thriving is part of the purpose of this podcast, and we definitely want you to take a break at any time. Warm bath, fresh air, walk a dog, have a bite of chocolate, whatever you need to do good care for yourself. Just as a reintroduction, if you're not familiar with me, I am the woman who was on the cover of Time magazine at age 18 as the first in history to speak out nationally and publicly as the victim of date rape. And HBO made a film about me, and I went on to become the executive director of the Take Back the Night Foundation. We are the oldest, largest global movement on sexual violence in all forms for all people in the world. So we encourage you to visit our website for lots more information. So I'm going to turn it over to our hosts and our guests for today.
Welcome back to the Dear Katie podcast. I'm Claire Kaplan.
And I'm Emily Wang, and I'll be co-hosting with Claire today.
Thanks, Emily. And I'm so excited that today that we have this wonderful guest, Jessica Browning, and we're delighted to have her today. She is a musician and composer. And last year she released her album, Her Odyssey. And now she's on the road doing talks and educating the world about the use of music and breathwork for healing from trauma. Welcome, Jessica.
Thank you. I'm so happy to be here, Claire.
And why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, and then let's get into why you are on the podcast today. What brought you to the podcast?
Okay. So I am an American harpist, singer-songwriter. I'm 37 years old, and I currently live, as you said, in St. Martin on our sailboat. And I'm traveling this year back to the States to do a speaking tour called Healing Through Music, where I'll bring my harps and talk about how I've used music to heal from sexual trauma that I survived as a child. And I live off of my music, and I will be next year, it's very exciting, traveling to New Zealand to do a master's in music therapy. And we'll be sailing there. So that'll be a whole nother adventure.
Fabulous. Sounds fabulous.
That's really
How
cool.
Exciting. Yeah.
Exciting.
So are you comfortable telling us a little bit about your experience as a child that led you to where you are now?
Yeah. So, and anytime we talk about trauma, I just invite us to do a little bit of grounding. And I just say to the audience, obviously, at any point, if something doesn't feel safe, you can always just turn it off. So everyone, if you don't mind, just take a breath in through your nose with me and hold it. And then out through your mouth like wind through the trees. Great. And at any point during when I'm talking, you can also always go back to your breath and your body. I think as survivors, it's so hard to sometimes stay in our bodies. And they're, where our trauma happened, but they're also our best friends. So anyway, but my story is when I was 9 and 10, my uncle moved in with my family in a very large house that they had rented to do a retreat center for ministers. And he lived right, my parents gave him their room. So he was right next door to me where my room was. And it started out I have memories a little bit earlier where I think he was kind of grooming me, some inappropriate touch, but it wasn't it was obviously sexual abuse then, but it got progressively worse as he lived with us. And for a number of years, it's like I had body memories, but not conscious awareness of what had actually happened. And when I was 13, the year before, I was hospitalized for anorexia. So I to try to kind of control my body and what was happening and what had happened, I just stopped eating. That's the way that I kind of dealt with it as a child. And so when I started to really work through things in therapy around my eating disorder, one day someone touched my back, and it's like all of the memories, well, not all of them, but just some of the body memories really, really came back strongly. And it's like I put the connection with what happened.
Okay, could we just stop you right there? Because I think it's a great inflection point. If you don't mind, if I could just ask you a couple of questions going back.
Sure, yeah.
You say he occasionally did certain things that were really, now were grooming prior to his moving into your family's home. Is that correct?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. So, what did you have? I'm just wondering, because when things happen in a home, one wonders, and a lot of our survivors who had experiences in their own homes with someone who was living there who was abusing them, if any other adults were aware or had even a notion of what might be going on, and if not, what strategies were you taking to hide it? If you know what I mean.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So abuse is so complicated, and sadly, it often happens in a home and a family context. So I don't think my parents knew. I mean, obviously they didn't know. There were signs. My uncle was a minister, and he had been kicked out of the United Methodist Church for I don't even know the exact reason, but there were issues around like sexual misconduct, and but they just assumed that he was lying, or that the church was like manipulated, that it wasn't true. So there were kind of signs there, to be honest. But I don't think, and I think that's what's so complicated in these situations. It happens in a family system. So of course my mother believed me, but she didn't want to, like, she would never think that her brother would do this. And I think in many ways my dad, wanted to make my mom happy. So wouldn't also question the fact that, he was in our house. I think when they started to become aware of some adult sexual relationships he had, which were inappropriate, then they asked him to leave our house. And the way that I dealt with it, I kind of say there was like day child and night child. So day child just sort of kept going and really tried to stay. I used to love to be inside the house and do, art or do things. And I specifically remember just like trying to stay out of the house as much as I could. And then at nighttime, I remember like they had these, what are they called? To keep the mosquitoes away, like on the window. And I kept kicking them out and trying to go outside at night and like escape it. And my parents kept putting them back, and I never had the courage or maybe even the conscious awareness in some ways. Like the daytime child was like almost a different person, and the nighttime child was just trying to protect me and survive. So I think that
Wow.
sort of fragmented self, it's something that I've actually spoken to a lot of survivors about. And that's what makes it so complicated, in any kind of court system, or even for survivors to feel like, well, am I crazy? Like, how is this possible? Because it's not, we don't remember trauma in our mind like we remember what I did yesterday or going to the grocery store. It's actually stored in a totally different part of our brain. Yeah.
Wow.
That's crazy. I have to say, I think that, it's incredible. I think what our minds are capable of doing to keep us safe and alive, and to survive these sorts of traumatic experiences. So it's incredible to sort of hear you talk about the ways that you, in a sense, protected yourself in that scenario. I do want to circle back to something that you mentioned earlier, that your uncle was a minister. And I'm a little bit curious about whether or not that sort of religious aspect of it played into any of the ways that he treated you?
Yeah, so this is actually the first time publicly I think that I'm going to speak about this aspect of the abuse. So there was there was a like a media coverage that around my cousins, because my cousins were also abused by my uncle, and they went into the church where he had served for many years, and the first thing they saw was a picture of him. And they said, well, how? He's actually a convicted child molester. Like, how could this be? And so there was a really big, the Charlotte Observer did a really big article on it. And there was a YouTube video, which I find really powerful when we actually talk about all three of our journeys. And I was living in France at that time. So I'm like, I come in on Zoom from France. But it was actually a really huge part of the abuse. And I've only really recently kind of started to have conscious awareness of it. But it's complicated because there was actually a court case when I was a child, and my uncle was convicted. But what I remembered at that point was actually more of the softer. It was still very violent, but the soft, I wouldn't say softer parts of my abuse. That sounds crazy, but like the less, like I didn't have very specific memories of penetration. And there's this whole part of the abuse, which was sort of, I guess, like ritual abuse. It was very, I would say he kind of tortured me. He didn't kind of, he like tortured me. And there was a whole sense of like, I am God and you are like a sinner, and you deserve to suffer. It was very messed up. And it didn't start that way, but it got that way. And like big, very, very big trigger warning. And I've never publicly on anything ever talked about this, but for some reason at this point in my journey, I do actually want to be more, I just want somewhere there to be someone that isn't just me that, knows about this. And my therapist and my husband, but he actually had me kill a cat as like a part of some very strange ritual. And it just like it ripped apart my psyche inside. So I've had to work really hard for years to kind of integrate what I would call like these fragmented parts of myself. And I've been really grateful to work with a lot of wonderful therapists. But the whole, religious component of it, I've had to really myself go on a lot of kind of spiritual seeking to understand what the divine means to me. And I believe that, I call like God or spirit, and it's this sort of presence of love that never left me, but didn't, do these things to me. And it took me a long time to have peace with that. And I still have a lot of issues with religion. Like I don't like going into certain kinds of churches or settings. And I personally don't attend, church, but I meditate and I do a lot of yoga. So that's been a really long journey.
That sounds so difficult. Your courage in speaking out about this, Jessica, is amazing. You said fragmented parts of you. Were you diagnosed with dissociative identity disorder, or is it some just more complex PTSD?
Yeah, I mean, it's not like I never had like whole separate personalities. And I've been really, I think part of my choosing, I didn't speak about this, but as soon as the trial was over, it lasted so many years. I think it started when I was 12, and it finally, I think my uncle was convicted 2 separate times. One time he was appealed, then we went back to court. A second time he was convicted again. But when he finally actually went to prison, I had just graduated from Bryn Mawr. So I think I was 21. And the day that he actually finally went to prison, I left to go to New Zealand to live in a Buddhist monastery for a while to again do that some of that spiritual healing. But I think part of me going so far away, it really protected me because I felt safe. Like, and even it sounds so strange that we live on this sailboat, but there's a part of it where I do actually feel safe. It's like, well, can you find me? No. And so part of living abroad, and I lived in France for a number of years, it's like it invited my brain and it invited my whole soul to say, like, you're safe and I will take care of you. So I didn't have totally different personalities, but I did have what I would call fragmented memories or body memories or a lot of dissociation.
Wow. And the trauma of the you killing the cat, it's, I know that's not unusual for abusers to force their victims into committing those kinds of acts. It keeps them entrapped in a way.
Yeah.
Um,
And it was also a way for me not to speak out. I do remember part of that being like, I will do this to your family members if you speak out.
Yeah.
So
Wow. So what led you to the point where you went to New Zealand and you retreated for a while. How did you embark on the therapeutic, on getting therapy and seeking that kind of healing process?
Yeah. So I think every place that I've lived, and it's also all been in connection with music, to be honest. I think this is something that I do want to say to survivors, that the typical go into a therapy office and just talk about your feelings. Actually, for me anyway, it wasn't that effective. Doing body work, I did do some EMDR, and using music as a way to write about what happened to me and to I feel like every time I play my harp, it's like a different instrument or a different part of me is able to finally have a voice. It's so healing for me, music and playing instruments and using my actual voice. So yeah, every place that I lived, I sought out a therapist, and I found it to be also really rich because I've lived in so many different places. I've been able to pick out nuggets of cultural healing that happens. In France, they're really focused on alternative healing and on energies and on family constellations. When I was in India, I worked with someone that did past life healing. We actually didn't do any past life. We just focused on this one. But she exposed me to EFT and some work around what's it called? Ho'oponopono. So it's like an act of forgiving yourself and releasing others. It was really powerful. And here in St. Martin, I actually worked at distance with a therapist from Philadelphia. So I've worked with a bunch of different people, but different. And I feel like there's so many layers to trauma and healing. So it's funny. I feel like I realized I needed to go back to therapy when I became a mother, and I actually needed a more grounded type of therapy. I think I've done talk therapy recently for the first time that I have in 15 years, because being a mother is such a grounding, in some ways you have to be so practical. And I needed to kind of invite the adult self in me to kind of step up and show up in a really grounded physical way. So thank you, my son.
Emily, I'm sure you have questions.
Ooh, yeah. I do think that, at least for me personally, finding therapists and, discovering these new ways of healing has been really, I will say, difficult, just because I think that the information out there can be really scattered. So how are you going about finding these new routes to healing? And how have you sort of incorporated them and meshed them together?
That's a great question. So I think the first thing is I realized that when I went to just talk therapists or psychotherapists, I would be really frustrated by how little I felt people were understanding trauma. And even sometimes not intentionally, but saying triggering things like, well, just don't focus on, the trauma, like focus on, I don't know. It wasn't that helpful. And a book that's been infinitely helpful to me is called The Body Keeps Score.
Oh, yes.
By Bessel van der Kolk. And also, I don't have the book with me, but Levine, he does also a lot of work around like body and somatic stuff. But it's like when I read actually about what happens to the brain in trauma, I suddenly feel seen. And I find it really freeing. When we, as survivors, we can talk and know that dissociation is super common. And that, when you're reliving a traumatic memory, like all of the parts of the brain light up where trauma takes place, but the part of the brain that's responsible for speaking turns off. So like how do we work with people, when they're triggered or when they're even talking about their abuse, suddenly their body is reliving it. So bringing in grounding practices first. And I think that's where music comes in, where it's so healing, is you can again create a safe space in your body. Because when we're abused, our bodies become the war zone. They are the side of the attack. So how do we again make friends with our bodies? So I think a great thing when survivors are looking for therapists is looking for someone that specifically says they have experience in dealing with trauma. And then you can look for things like EMDR. There's a lot of great dance therapists and art therapists and music therapists out there too that can bring in what I would call like the child parts. Children love to create. We love to make music and art and dance. And it's like, how do you bring that bodiedness back in when it's so unsafe to be in your body? So that's been a real key for me. And I can't even begin to describe to you how excited I am to hopefully, next year I'm going to be doing this, but to be actually having a degree and being able to walk with people and in a way where I know what it's like to walk that journey when for so long I felt actually kind of alone with certain therapists. Mm-hmm. So it's definitely a journey, and we grow and we change. And there's also, I call seasons of healing. Sometimes we need like a really loving, gentle, very motherly, kind of therapist. Sometimes we need someone that will challenge us more. So I think trust yourself and trust how you feel with someone. If you don't get a good vibe, no questions asked, it just doesn't work, and find someone else. And that can be a complex thing. But I do believe that if we let it, healing does come to us. So I think also trust your own healing process. If you look at how animals heal, they'll go off in a corner and just sort of let their bodies rest and heal naturally. And we put all, this pressure on us to heal and done in this timeline. And healing there's no timeline for healing. It's trusting yourself and creating safe enough spaces to go into the pain. And then, to be able to be grounded again in life. It's such a journey. And I have such respect for survivors because it's so hard.
Thank you for all that. That's such important wisdom to share, because many of our listeners, I'm sure, have struggled to find a therapist, or they feel they have to stay with the same one for a long period of time. Mm-hmm. But it's true. People have different ways of doing therapy, and one needs different things at different points in the process of the journey. So Thank you for describing that. I think that's very important. You mentioned author Levine, Peter Levine. I don't know if you remember his first name, because I know our listeners like to. We've discussed The Body Keeps the Score on a number of occasions. But Peter Levine also has some wonderful books. I'm wondering if you can talk to us a little bit now about the work you're doing specifically and how you use music for healing. What do you do?
Yeah. So right now, where do I even start with this? So what happened is I've been aware for a number of years that I write music around my story for the last 15, 20 years, well, not 20, 15 years, I've been a professional harpist. And so much of the work that comes out has just been around healing and specifically around women. But when I say women, I mean that, people that identify as women, because I believe that gender obviously it's a choice, and when I say women, I don't ever want my trans siblings to feel like, what about me? So yeah, just wanted to say that. Mm-hmm. But I just found that it was so healing for me. And then this past, so we were living in France and we bought this sailboat and we sailed to Martinique where our son Rumi was born. And I realized I just wrote during this ocean crossing, this album about that journey. And so we had lived in Martinique, there was COVID, and I started to do a lot more healing work around because I became a mother and that just triggers everything. And I really wanted to be very grounded and present for our son. And so when we sold our boat and we sailed across the ocean again, and it was like this most amazing experience because when you cross an ocean, you don't touch land and we had 30 days without seeing any land or any other people except ourselves. And it creates this like experience of doing what I call almost like a life review before you actually leave your bodies. You have all this time, you have all this space with the ocean. It's like you go into this void, and it's really, really powerful. So I realized at the end of this journey that I had written this album, and it was so screamingly clear to me that it was about really healing from sexual abuse. And I had done, before Rumi was born, I had done a talk that I didn't even, how do I even say this? I got to the talk. It was called Healing Through Music. And I was asked to do this talk because of all the media that had been out about my uncle. And I got on stage. I promise you, I know I had prepared for this, but I got on stage and all of a sudden people were clapping. It was the end. And I was like, what just happened? And I think it went really well. I think people were really moved. But I was aware that I, again, went into this kind of autopilot and I wasn't ready for it. So
wait, so you dissociated through the whole performance? You were basically out of your body?
Yeah. And the thing is, though, and I think survivors can relate to this. We are really, really good at it's like, we can really go into like, it's how we survive,
Yes,
we can go
absolutely.
into like, mm-hmm. I can, and I know that it touched people and I'm sure it was really, really moving. But the funny thing was that I just like, I have little snippets kind of it, but I know I wasn't really, deeply embodied and there. So I was like, well, I'm just, I'm not going to do this. This is too close to home. And at the end of this trip, with our sailboat, it's like I had this vision for the whole talk and it felt so embodied. And it was like this voice in me was like, well, it's time now. And you're ready for this now. And I think I also, there's like in terms of globally what's going on, I think I'm pretty pissed and fed up with how little work there still is done around sexual abuse. The statistics are just so disheartening. It's 1 in 3 women and 1 in 6 men in their lifetime. This affects so many of us. And it's also like a bipartisan thing. Trump has, I think, 25 different allegations. Those are like actual in court allegations. Biden has, I think, one, and other stories. It's just like, how is this possible in our world, in our country? And I think part of also becoming a mother is, it's just, what world do I want to leave, to work on creating for our children? And so that's how these talks kind of came about. And it's been very exciting and very embodied and very grounding to prepare for them. And every time that I talk again about my story, I'm just so moved by how many of us there are out there. And also that healing is a process, but we don't heal alone. You know, the trauma happens alone. We are left to deal with it. That is a very lonely process. But when we can talk about it, when we can be community with each other, that's a huge part of healing. We become, again, whole and inside ourselves, and then with our community. So those are the talks that I'm going to be doing around healing through music, and how I do healing with just music in general. So I'm not a certified music therapist, and I'm just going to say that right now. I'm going to become one. But what I've found for me is that anytime that I play my harp, it's like those parts of my brain, or those parts of myself that didn't have words to talk about the abuse, or the parts of my body that have those memories that are struggling with anxiety or shame or whatever. It's like I give them space to take floor, and they can come out and speak to me and be heard. I think there's something so powerful when we can say, I see you, I hear you, I am with you, I believe you. But just saying that verbally, it's like if you're able to paint it or dance it or sing it, you create that realness that you are there for yourself, that you do believe yourself. So I think that art and creativity is the strongest act of survival. It's like you're taking what happened to you and transforming it into something for good, transforming it into something about life, transforming it into something for healing, for others to be shared. I think that creativity is, it's one of the most beautiful acts of survival that we have.
I love that, Jessica. That is beautifully said. And I wonder, Emily, do you have some questions?
Yeah, I did want to say that was incredibly beautiful to sort of express that. And that's something that I feel as well, that creativity is something so like deeply human. And it gives voice to things that I don't think words can really say. And when I am creative, I definitely feel this sort of like deep connection to myself that I don't often have. I am kind of thinking a little bit about this sort of great community of survivors that we've built with the podcast, and of course you've built through speaking and sharing your music. And I am curious about the sort of contrast between the support that you find through community and the justice system, if that makes any sense, that these are two very different spaces. And I'm wondering if you could share a little bit about how the justice system and the support that you got there contrasts a lot with, I guess, the community that you found now.
Great question.
Yeah, that's a really great question. So this is a really complex question for me because, I know that most, I don't even know the statistics on this, but most sexual assault or trauma or misconduct never goes to trial. It's often, it's not safe for people to even talk about it. It's such a complex thing. I know also that I am, I'm a white well, although I'm bisexual, but like I am like this. It's so disheartening when you look at like the statistics for our trans siblings, and for Black girls, it's so much higher. For Native Americans, like it's like all that's wrong in our world just shows up in sexual abuse and poverty. Like people that live in poverty are much higher risk for abuse. Like it's just such a complex thing. So I understand it's just compounded with privilege, the fact that my case, or not my case, was the state of Pennsylvania, but that it actually went to trial. And I think what was so complex for me is I was a child, and I was 13, I think, the first time I had to be in front of my uncle in a court case. And that was just so triggering and traumatizing. And I remember there were so many delays, and we would never be alerted to the delays before. So we would show up for like a preliminary hearing or a whatever thing where I'd have to testify, and get there like with all the anxiety, and then be told, oh, well, it's been delayed. And I remember my like the one where I was just like, are you shitting me? It was the week of the finals at school. I think I was 17. And we get there, and we were I think it was like for the big trial, like it was a big deal. And they told us that it had been delayed. And the reason was that my uncle was on vacation and couldn't make it. And I was just like,
what? Wait a minute. Weren't they supposed to notify? Wasn't there a victim witness advocate who contacted you? Did no one let you know?
Oh, well, and that was the thing. This wasn't the legal system. What is it called? I can't believe I've forgotten the name for this. But like, there's the defense and the prosecution. They were wonderful. The attorneys were wonderful. I always remember her name was Hope. She was like the victim's assistant. She was so wonderful. I had this whole really amazing support team, but it was like this came from the defense, and that's I don't know. I think the judge that we had too. I don't understand kind of exactly how things like this continued to happen, but that's what happened. And it created also this part of me where I just kind of I just kind of stopped putting that much. I couldn't like put all of my energy into it anymore, and I just had to keep living. So I think in some ways it created resiliency, but it was very, very long. It lasted, I think, our whole family. I have my mom and dad and brother. They're just the most wonderful people. And I think all of us like had trauma around the trauma and had trauma around the legal system.
Yeah.
And I think that was also part of wanting to go to New Zealand at the end of my studies, because this also went into when I was studying at Bryn Mawr. It was just like, I just need to get away from all of this. And it was one of the best decisions that I've made.
Understandable. Yeah. So that's, and your story is a perfect example of why so many survivors simply don't bother reporting, because they hear these stories and they think, why would I put myself through something like this? Even with all the support.
Yeah. And and it's complex. Like, I don't know. And this is someone else's flag to fly. This really, like, I don't even think prison works. I'm not happy that my uncle went to prison. I don't think that our legal system, I don't think it works. I think that it's really complex. So what I choose to do, because I go down this kind of like spiral thinking about it all, is I can focus on healing, and I can focus on healing myself. I can focus on creating community where we can heal together. And that I do feel power in, not the legal system. You know what I mean? Like, it's, wow. It sometimes, like, I feel overwhelmed by the amount of trauma that, you know, is in our world and is in our legal system. And but when I think about healing, when I think about creating, when I think about being a voice, that I feel like we can have power in.
Wow.
Yes.
That's so amazingly said. And I see that every day, I think, when we work on the podcast, just to see how much support and how much love and community there is among survivors, beyond just sort of the concept of seeking justice through the legal system, that we're all here for each other, regardless of what happens and regardless of where we are in our healing journeys. I did want to sort of come back to it. You said that this trial lasted throughout a lot of your sort of young teen girlhood. How did that sort of influence? Because I remember being a teenage girl, and that in and of itself was such a crazy, like, difficult time to sort of discover who you are. But at the same time, to have this be happening in the background, what was that like?
Yeah. So I think that I wasn't a teenage girl or a child, really. And the gift has been, as I've lived abroad, I've had so many very magical, very empowering, very self-discovery kind of experiences. So I do feel like I've, like, later, so post 21, you know, it's like that's when I kind of had my adolescence. And I do think that when you travel, or when you make a choice as a survivor to do something positive for you, that kind of rewrites the narrative in many ways about who you are, about what you're capable of. It's so empowering, and that's healing in itself. So I kind of wonder if I don't know. I don't think it serves anything to wonder what if. But I'm actually grateful for kind of how it ended up happening, because I really like who I am now. And I've been able to go on this long, you know, healing journey. And if things hadn't happened as they happened, I wouldn't be in the same place.
I guess as a final sort of sentiment to our listeners and our lovely audience of survivors and supporters out there, what's sort of one closing remark or idea or sort of aspect of your healing journey that you'd like to share with us today?
I think the thing that I just want to say, it's not really even about my journey. It's about our journey collectively, is just that I see you and I believe you, and you're so strong, and you're going to be okay. And you're worth it. And I love you. Yeah, I just want to say that. And that it's such a long and painful journey. But you're going to get through it. And please be gentle and loving, and create those safe places for yourself. And it's going to be okay. Yeah, that's what I wanted to say.
Thank you so much, Jessica. That was beautiful. Thank you again for joining us today. This was a wonderful conversation. Emily and I are really excited about this this episode and what you shared with us. And I also want to thank all our wonderful volunteers who helped make this podcast possible. And thank you to all our listeners. You're here. You make this podcast happen. You're here to bear witness and to learn and to heal. So thank you for joining us also. And if you need any information, resources and so on, you can go to takebackthe.night.org for resource lists, and also to learn how to contact our legal support hotline. And please share Dear Katie with your friends on social media. This is how we spread the news about this program. It's really important that the word gets out. So please help us out in that way. So, and remember, of course, as we've been discussing through this whole episode, to take care of yourselves and remember that self-care is essential to healing and to thriving.
Thank you again, everybody, for joining another episode of the Dear Katie podcast. I hope very much you found today's episode helpful, empowering, and a way to take another step in that long journey toward healing and supporting those we care about, learning about sexual violence prevention, and also survivor support. For those of you who don't know, again, the Take Back the Night website has tons of great resources, books, self-care options, cool merch. If you're feeling like you need a wearable, we have great t-shirts. Of course, we would love it if you follow along on our free newsletter with news and events going on around the country and even around the globe. And finally, don't forget to like us and follow us on Facebook and Instagram. You'll find our entire community popping up here and there, and recaps of our podcast episodes as well. So together we shatter the silence, and together we end the violence. Take care.